You're watching the GI E3 Newscast. I am James Batchelor. I'm editor-in-chief of GamesIndustry.biz. Joining me today is Danielle Partis, our news editor. Danielle, how are you doing?
Hello, James. I am well. It's been a long week, but we're getting to the end of it, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. How are you coping? Because you've had an E3 week and a COVID vaccine to kind of cope with. That's just too much for a human being to cope with.
Yep, it was ill-timed, but I was happy to finally get the vaccine. It did wipe me out a little bit, which wasn't ideal, but again, we get through. It's the weekend.
It is the weekend. It's Friday. We are nearly there. Today, we have a special industry guest. We have Shahid Ahmad, an indie developer. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure, James, as always.
It is always a pleasure talking to you. How has your E3 been? I say E3, I mean E3 and Summer Games Fest and all the adjacent events. Like, no one seems to agree on a kind of an umbrella term by which we can refer to what has happened over the last 7 to 8 days.
Yeah, I think of it as E3 week. I mean, there's been some kind of E3 that's happened, but it's not the real E3. There's a sense that I really should be in Santa Monica right now, warming up for a day or perhaps after a very, very long night. And there are friends who I haven't met in a year, even though they just live down the road from me in the UK. And there's that kind of feeling, and like everyone else has had their E3 and been, but I haven't, which didn't happen very often. I must say I was very, very privileged to be able to go to most E3s. But it feels like an E3 week. Feels like E3's happened without me, and I'm kind of enjoying it vicariously.
So you have to confess, I've only done one E3. So this year kind of felt similar to previous ones in that, right, it's all the big press conferences, it's staying up and, you know, watching these of an evening and frantically trying to cover them like while they're live. And that has been no different at all. But then the bit that's missing is those 3 or 4 days at the show floor afterwards where you're learning more about what you've just seen. Like, this has been very kind of, here's a trailer, and it's like, usually you get like a hands-on and an in-depth developer interview and a real sense of what that trailer was really showing. Case in point, the prime example I'll give was, I remember the year I went, there was a Cyberpunk trailer, and the trailer showed nothing, but the behind-the-scenes demo, everyone was talking about that because it was really impressive and it really gave a sense of what the game was aiming to be. And there isn't that this year. There isn't. I know that they attempted to give the media access to certain things like last week, but it just, you're not seeing the same level of coverage and excitement come out, I don't think.
I think part of that is because it's very much an industry event. And, you know, you have a lot of journalists meeting one another at that event, and the large players certainly count on that. The word of mouth travels, and then, oh, did you check that demo out? Did you go in the queue? Were you at the detailed playthrough, and so on? And then someone will say, oh no, I didn't catch that, I'll go back. And then that kind of little communication chain builds up and builds excitement around it, and you see it reflected in the reporting maybe up to a week after. And that isn't there this time. People might well be talking in real time, but they're talking almost at each other instead of with each other, huddled in little corners on the show floor. So you're missing that. There's something organic about that, and that would build up the excitement around one or two things in a way that you're not going to get when the whole thing's virtual. Because everyone's equally at E3 this week, right?
Yeah.
And if everyone's equally at E3, then obviously that means no one's at E3.
Yeah. Like we're all on the kind of the same playing field as like the consumers who are watching from home. Like there's not really any difference in terms of access, like not in a real sense.
Sorry, go on, James.
No, carry on.
Well, I was going to say the other aspect to E3, of course, is all the behind-the-scenes meetings between people wanting to do business there. And of course, very little business actually gets done, but business gets its wheels greased and relationships are refreshed and so on. And so none of that has happened. You know, you have all of these rooms up in wherever it was. I can't even remember the names of the halls. There's the North Hall, the West Hall, right? And then you've got all the meetings rooms
in between.
Yeah. Oh God, what was Kentia Hall? The hall that nobody goes to. And my screensaver's kicked in. I must bring back my branded content immediately, which was strategically placed to reflect
don't think we didn't pick up on that.
No, I knew you picked up on it. You're journalists, for crying out loud. But yeah, I had to somehow display my loyalty, but it doesn't want to know.
I'll be honest. I thought you were joining us just midway through a session of Returnal. Like, I really appreciated.
That's exactly what I wanted you to think. The truth is, I've had it for a while, and I've not played it yet. And I'd set it up to make it think like you'd interrupted me mid-game. But I promise you, today's my day for playing this game, which I've been looking forward to for absolutely ages. Let's do some other PlayStation branded content, shall we?
There we
go. There we go. Well, while yours is loading up, I'll pass to Danielle briefly. Like, so you've kind of first year with us, but obviously not first year covering E3. I imagine. Like, what was your impression? Like the overall show. Like, you always get to the end of the week and you want to do kind of winners, losers, biggest surprise, biggest disappointment. Like that narrative always feels less and less relevant each year.
It does, yeah. And this is actually the first E3 that I've covered full time, because I've done it freelance in previous years. And obviously mobile, there's not a whole lot of mobile stuff going on, which is what I used to do before I was here. So yeah, it's a weird one because like Shahid said, it's sort of like it's E3 week, and I said it on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, is that it's more of a state of mind than an event in my head. It's sort of, I know that there's this big week coming and it's an onslaught of news and reveals and being very tired, but it feels very far away to the E3 that I kind of remember watching, that I've watched you know, for the last 10 or 12 years. I've always been a fan of it, and yeah, it felt very different to that, but also it's still being quite exciting for me as a new person coming in to cover it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think there's a less excitement for me over the reveals now than there was years ago. And again, like Shahid said, there's nothing mind-blowing, nothing that I didn't know was coming that's gone, oh my God. But there are things that I'm looking forward to, a couple of sequels that I'm looking forward to. So it's been nice. It's been a nice entrance into covering E3, because I imagine it will be, well, fingers crossed, it will be a physical event next year, and we'll be fully into that onslaught. So it's almost, for me, felt like a test at E3, like a practice E3. So
this was the tutorial. This
Indeed,
is the tutorial, yeah. And then next year is the first level. Shahid, how much do you keep up with it? Like, obviously, you know, not being there this time, like, did you keep up with all the news? Have you just been kind of following the headlines?
I did have a look at some of the games that were announced or refreshed or revisited, and I didn't see an awful lot that really blew me away. I suspect that if I'd actually been there, then there would have been word of mouth escalation of a few really big players, and I might well have been caught up in that. But I've allowed myself a little bit of distance this time, so I kind of feel like Bo Burnham in the film Inside on Netflix, which is wonderful. If you haven't seen it, you must see it, where he's seeing himself and he's reacting to a reaction of a reaction of a reaction, and so on forever, which is wonderful. And it feels a bit like that this time around. And because of that, I've been able to have a look at what's coming through with a sense of detachment that I wouldn't ordinarily get. What am I looking forward to? It's hard to tell. There was Starfield. I thought that looked good. I would definitely want to play Starfield. But some of the other stuff, you know, kind of left me feeling a bit, I don't know, feels very, very much like a preview of 2022, as opposed to this is a good stuff coming in 2021. I mean, there's the other thing. A lot of people, is it all right to be controversial?
Do it.
Absolutely. A little bit controversial. Okay, so a lot of people were bigging up the Outer Worlds 2 trailer because it was irreverent and made fun of itself, and they thought that was amazing. Seriously? This is a sequel, right? Now, sequels are the easiest thing in the video games world to do if the first one was successful. Okay, it's the safest bet of all time. So to use that as an opportunity for a send up is not really risk taking at all. People were treating it like it was risk taking. If you liked Outer Worlds 1, which I did, then presumably you'll be interested in Outer Worlds 2.
Yeah.
But you might be slightly miffed that all they could be bothered to show was a send up of video games in general, which I think is, one, it's a wasted opportunity, but two, it's also an opportunity for some people to say, oh, look how grown up we are as an industry, we can send ourselves up and it's absolutely cool. Well, yeah, you can do that. But if you really wanted to make a statement, you would do that with a brand new game. No one's going to do that. So it wasn't risky at all.
Yeah.
And it was almost just sending ourselves up for the sake of it on a perfectly safe thing to send up. I mean, yeah, it was mildly entertaining, and I know nobody else in the world agrees with my assessment of it, but that was just my take on it, because I take video games very seriously, and I do that because I spent most of my life in video games. In fact, I spent more time in my life than most people have spent alive in this industry. So they mean a lot to me, you know. So people are going to send it up, then do it for the right reasons. But don't do it on a sequel because that's not risky.
Yeah.
I thought there were a lot of way too many sequels, way too many remasters. So we're in that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're in that whole consolidation, play it safe phase where. So one of the things that's happened recently is Control. Did you like Control?
I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. But it's free on everything now.
Yeah.
That happened so fast. That scares me personally, because if a game that good has had to go to subscription services and monthlies like Game Pass as quickly as it has done, a game with production values like that, with amazing content and an original IP at that, that's a little bit worrying. So not because of that, but that's an indication of why so many people are going to be playing it safe. There will be so many remasters because we're in that whole consolidation phase of the industry. Next year, we'll see the emergence of some new IP and a few more risks being taken as people get to grips with the technology. So, you know, ray tracing was in its really, really early days when Control came out, and they had the whole ray tracing stuff in there. But next year, it will have been established for a couple of years, so people will really get to grips with it. And either use it or not doesn't really matter, but they'll certainly start to get to grips with the power of the new systems, and hopefully there'll be far fewer supply issues as well, so people will actually get to play all these wonderful games.
I was thinking, I'm trying to think back to what it was like the first E3 after the arrival of the Xbox One and the PS4, because that it would be the equivalent year. Like, right, we are in the first year of the new generation, and I feel like that E3 would have shown, I'm gonna have to actually go back and check this, but would have shown like, right, this is why you need to be excited. This is why you're justified in spending hundreds of pounds on these brand new boxes under your telly. This is the stuff you're going to get for it. And there wasn't that, like, you know, particularly because, you know, we're still in the stage where a lot of the stuff is kind of cross generation. So with the exception of a few exclusives, like it's all going to be available on previous machines if you still have those. And to be fair, that makes business sense given the you know global semiconductor shortage and other pandemic related consequences means that the install bases of the new consoles are quite lower than they could be. But yeah, it's still, you wanted to see a bit more of the future, like not just 2022, but beyond 2022. And I know there are some franchises out there, like, certainly an Xbox, Fable, Perfect Dark, all those sort of things, they are years away. They must be. Like, so we know that they are coming, but yeah, there wasn't that sense of like what we've got to look forward to in the far-flung future.
No, and if you're going to be creating stuff for the far-flung future, you're not going to be showing it at this E3, certainly. It's going to be way too early. You've got less and less time in the minds and the hearts and the keyboards of the customer these days. You've got to make that impact extremely carefully and time it extremely well. And you probably don't want to be making that impact when you don't have the largest possible install base to reach out to anyway. It might be useful in the sense that it sways you towards one or the other. But I don't think now's the time for that either. I think that has already happened. If people were going to go to PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series S or X, then they would have made that decision a year and a half ago. And it would have been based, my guess is, largely on the friends' networks that are already built. And very rarely do you get that kind of switch. It happened with the PS4. People switched in droves from Xbox to PS4. And it's happened before as well. And people switched to Xbox 360 instead of going to PS3. So but we haven't seen that this time, I don't think. I think we've seen people stay in their camps. That's just console. And of course, Nintendo carry on merrily along their own trajectory, doing whatever they want. And,
don't they
and everybody loves them for it. I mean, I heard someone say Nintendo saved E3. No, they didn't. I mean, you love Nintendo. That's why you said Nintendo saved E3.
Yeah.
But, let's have a look, shall we? Nintendo. I mean, I love you, Nintendo. I spent a fortune on you, Nintendo. But Breath of the Wild 2 announced for 2022, and then even then a maybe.
It's
I mean, okay, you were going to do that. You were going to do that. Let's face it. No one should be completely losing it over that. Metroid, yes, okay, I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of Metroid. It was, and really want to see the next 2D thing. But a 2D game, again, is that the greatest thing? Advance Wars, of course, that was one of the greatest games Game Boy Advance ever saw, and it'd be lovely to see that remastered for Switch. But these are not big announcements, and frankly, Nintendo doesn't need big announcements. It sells truckloads of the Switch anyway. It's got an amazing catalog already. People are going to buy that stuff for years. That's the other thing about Nintendo, is the shelf life of their games is incredible. In a way that I don't think you get with other devices so much. And we just talked about the shelf life of a brilliant new IP like Control, but you got stuff here that's 25, 30 years old, and they could remaster it for the next 100 years and people still buy it.
Guilty. It's true. I mean, Chris wrote a great opinion piece on the site about like kind of what's Nintendo's big game. Like looking at that direct, what's the big game for Christmas? Obviously, we've got the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes, but again, they're remakes. We've got Metroid, but Metroid's a very, very core franchise. He kind of pointed out like Mario Party. The previous Mario Party on Switch sold up to 15 million units, which is much bigger than anything like Metroid or Advance Wars has ever sold.
Yeah.
But you look at that, like people are still buying Animal Crossing and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a port of a Wii U game from, I can't even remember when. It was like within the first year of the Wii U. So you're talking 2012, 2013. Yeah. And that is still selling. That is still likely to be one of, if not Nintendo's biggest selling game of the year. Why the hell do they need anything big for 21? They don't.
They don't. They don't. They don't. I mean, I will still buy everything that they bring out. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You buy a new, if you buy a new Switch today, there's a ton of stuff you can buy and will not feel irrelevant. That's the beauty of not trying to push the technical envelope every time, and just by going for something based on style and content. Huge advantage. They don't need to play anybody else's game.
No, they don't. They are very much doing their own game, and it works. Like we're into unprecedented territory with Nintendo here, because usually this is like the fifth year. We're into the fifth year of Switch. Historically, with their platforms, with the exception of the Wii, which lasted slightly longer, the fifth year is usually when they just completely drop everything and move on to the next platform. So first-party releases and big first-party releases for the current console dry up completely because they concentrate on what's going to sell people the next machine. There isn't any indication that they need to do that. Usually by this point, we've heard like leaks or whatever that they're building, they're researching and developing like the next console. And all right, there's all this stuff of like the Switch Pro, but the Switch Pro, from all the reports that are out there, is going to be an extension of the current Switch, rather than, it's more like the new Nintendo DS than it is like the 3DS to the original. So, and as again, Chris has pointed out, I'm unscrupulously stealing Chris's opinions here. 2022 is going to have so many more blockbusters. You're going to see the open world Pokemon game. You're going to see Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Hopefully, please, they're aiming for Christmas. We will see. There's in theory, what's the Mario team been up to beyond the Bowser's Fury and the Super Mario 3D World remake. Like, there's got to be kind of an Odyssey 2 or a sequel to Odyssey in the way. And again, kind of, it's been pointed out that most of the games coming out for Nintendo consoles are actually outsourced to other studios. So we don't know what, their actual in-house teams, the ones that deliver these incredible blockbusters, have been quietly working on something for years, up to 5 years in the case of the Zelda team. So yeah, next year, in theory, could be a massive one for Nintendo. But then I always feel like there's always that anticipation before any Nintendo Direct, no matter what time of year it is like, this is going to be the one where they announce something massive, and then afterwards, but the next one, here's the justification. Next one, there'll be loads of stuff. So
and they haven't had a price cut yet, have they?
No,
they don't need one.
No, because people keep on buying it, and you've got the entry level Switch Lite. There's no need.
I've heard this for so long now. They're going to cut the price. No, they're not. they can sell as many as they're making. They're going to introduce a new model. No, they're not. They're only going to introduce a new model when it becomes too expensive to produce the current one, because chip design's moved on. It makes no sense for the factories to be making old chips anymore.
Yeah.
As soon as the economics change, they will change. But up until then, why drop the winning formula? I'm really impressed with Nintendo this generation. They've had a lot of my money.
The GI team, there's a lot of, I won't name them, there are a lot of members of the team, like the Zelda Game & Watch. They're like, well, that's rubbish. It doesn't even got the original Zelda Game & Watch game on it. It's just, yet more remakes, yet more stuff. It's the least they could have done for, it's very kind of minimal in terms of what we expected for anniversary plans. But the whole team's buying it. Most of the team is still buying it. Nintendo has this strange hold over us. Danielle, kind of what were your highlights? What were the biggest stuff that you came away with?
From Nintendo or from E3 in general?
Both.
Oh God. When you think back on a whole week and you're trying to remember what actually was announced. I've been looking forward to Halo for a long time. I was always a big Halo fan, and 5 sort of missed the mark for me and for a lot of people, it seems, judging by the way it's been left to die on the Xbox One. But I'm not convinced that we're going to see a full Halo in November, because they're trying to shoot for that 20th anniversary date of Combat Evolved. But I don't think that we're going to see a full game. I think maybe they will release a free-to-play multiplayer with a battle pass and try and attempt to get that player base from the Master Chief Collection over to Infinite in a multiplayer capacity. But I just cannot be convinced that there's going to be a full game out. So I'm trying to be excited for it, but also I'm cautious because I don't think that that's coming.
Well, there's the reports or the speculation, or perhaps it's stuff that they've actually said. Like the Halo Infinite is such a kind of a weird, mysterious product at this point, seemingly months from release.
Yeah.
Obviously the multiplayer is going to be free to play and standalone. And then I believe they've said that the campaign, they're going to be able to extend the life of this one by adding more campaigns and stuff. So it's not going to be like Halo Infinite and then you pick up Halo Infinite 2 in 2-3 years. They're going to expand on this one and add more campaigns, add more single player content. And if that's the case, if that's the model that they're aiming for, I wouldn't be shocked if we kind of get the first episode of the campaign they're currently working on.
Yeah.
Just in time for launch, and then the next episode would be like early Q1 2022 when we've maybe finished it, and then we'll deliver the rest of it next year as a kind of an anniversary kind of thing. So yeah, I'm intrigued as to how that's shaping up.
That to me feels like a really painful way to play a game, because I would like to just play the whole thing at once, but I think that's a very old way of looking at it. It's not a very money-making way of looking at it either, apparently. But you might be right. Other than that, I'm looking forward to Outer Worlds 2, but as we said earlier, it was just a logo with a trailer. We know it's coming at some point, so that feels so far off. Again, with Slime Rancher 2, I'm excited for another Slime Rancher, but again, that was just a trailer. No idea when it's going to land. And I think that was the whole thing with E3 for me. It was, there's a really cool trailer, that looks cool, but I'll forget about it in a couple of weeks because it's just a trailer. It's a cool concept, it looks good, but until I see any actual gameplay or get a sense of what is being made, I just can't bring myself to get excited over trailers anymore.
Good example of that is Redfall.
Yes.
I love Arcane games. The Dishonored games are among my favorite games of the past 2 generations, because they scratch a very particular itch for me. Like I've probably nerded before, but like my favorite game of all time is Thief 2, and Dishonored is basically the new Thief. So, and you know, I've enjoyed what little I've played of Prey. I think I'm really intrigued about Deathloop. I think they're a really great studio. Redfall, like the idea of taking this kind of their immersive simulation style of gameplay to what seems to be a multiplayer title, like, okay, that's interesting, but I have no idea how that's going to work, because that was just a CGI trailer setting up the fact that, hey, 4 sassy characters versus vampires coming soon. That's all we got from that.
Yeah, like it might be great, but I don't know what type of game it is. I don't know what they're making here. And everyone was sort of losing their minds, rightly so, because it's being made by Arcane, but there was just nothing there. Like, no game at all.
This is the joy of this end of week podcast, when we're all out of the shut up and take my money phase, and we're actually trying to think about what we're putting our money towards. Shahid, I want to kind of return to a point you were making earlier about Control and like how it goes free suddenly. Like, this is kind of a broader thing, not specific to E3, but Microsoft's presentation obviously primarily focused on Game Pass, because that is their strategy, that is their model. And I have to say, coming out of it, like, that really justified a kind of a subscription to Game Pass for me, at least. Like, I struggle to pick like a game of the show for me, but I've already pre-installed or set my Xbox to pre-install Hades, Forza Horizon 4, Flight Simulator, like a ton of others. Straight away downloaded Dishonored Death of the Outsider, because I finished Dishonored 2 earlier this year, and I thought, I will buy just Death of the Outsider. And then, of course, Microsoft was already in the process of buying. It's like, actually, no, I'll wait till it comes on Game Pass. Your thoughts on like kind of that model and what that might do? Because Control's a prime example. Like, I looked at that, I saw that a few years ago, like when they announced at E3, it looked stunning, and it is stunning. It's such an amazing game, and I want to be supportive of the studio, and I wanted to buy it, but I didn't. I played it on Game Pass, and I now feel I have Game Pass guilt, I think, is a phrase that we now need to introduce. Is Game Pass guilt, where you play through a game and realize you should have bought it.
Yeah, well, this is the nature of the world that we're in now, isn't it? I mean, how else does a game get attention? Without the attention, how will it sell any units? So in a world where our attention is divided into smaller and smaller pieces, it makes sense for a platform owner like Microsoft with the Xbox Game Pass to get as much quality into one channel as possible, because it's just going to keep people within that ecosystem. I mean, how much further than Netflix do we go? Not much. I mean, there's maybe room for 1 or 2 ancillaries, Prime Video being a good secondary, Disney Channel being one for the hardcore, and for old fogies like me, there's BritBox. But Netflix is the be all and end all, right? It's the one which everyone can agree. And although interactive is vastly different, I think Xbox understands that it's not games that they have to sell. That business is almost dead, except for a few people. Sony and Microsoft are massive exceptions, and will probably remain exceptions because of the studios that they own. But they're no longer trying to sell games. They're in the business of retaining and acquiring new customers. And the best way to retain your customers is to keep them on a subscription plan. And the best way to keep those customers happy, and therefore not switch to a competing service when there's the opportunity to end their contract, the contract being the end of life of a console, is to keep giving them good stuff. And the more they do that, the more they drive people into Game Pass, the more they're likely to sell, the more hardware they're likely to sell. The more valuable that customer base becomes, the more likely it is that Game Pass will be extended outside of hardcore video game platforms and onto other devices. And as their xCloud service becomes more and more interesting, it will then find a way of reaching more and more people. You get more and more content. So it's just a mechanism for capturing attention. But it's obviously becoming more valuable to Microsoft financially. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to spend the money they're spending hand over fist to acquire more and more content to be able to stick into this service. I mean, it's already absolutely brilliant value. Yes, I pay for it, and it's worth every penny. But here's the interesting thing. My Xbox Series S is set up downstairs, right? I can't touch that telly. It's a family telly. Guess what gets played on that telly? The Switch.
Yeah.
We've got this enormous 4K 65-inch telly, and we're playing Switch games on it.
Yep.
So here I'm in the spare room with a much, much smaller 4K telly. What have I got up here? PS5. So people who love games, they don't care about the machine necessarily. They might have one, two, or more. If you think about hardcore PC gamers, they're willing to spend a fortune on their machines, right? So money isn't the obstacle for people who really care about games. It really isn't. It's just time. And more of us are older now, so we can afford to buy, you know, games. And it's not about, do you have the money to buy a game anymore? It's where you're going to spend your time. Because games are absolutely everywhere, and they cost very, very little for customers to get hold of, thanks to services like Games Pass and Plus, and to a much lesser extent Apple Arcade, and there are others as well, of course. But Nintendo doesn't have to play that game, right? Nintendo doesn't care. They just have to create or make sure that great games are created for their inexpensive to manufacture hardware. PlayStation not necessarily playing that game, because although they were around with Plus and they had a really good Plus content to announce at E3, was it 2013? It was, wasn't it? When Plus was announced, but then 2014 started to show off more of the content. It was always a couple of games. There's still a couple of games, and Game Pass now has gone well beyond that. You know, the content offering on Game Pass includes the EA stuff as well, and now the Bethesda stuff, and it's just nuts. I mean, there's more content than you'll ever play.
I was honestly
more content than my expanded Xbox will let me play.
Yeah, I was honestly waiting for this year. Like I've got it in my head that Ubisoft Plus is going to be coming to Game Pass at some point. Like, so they'll have EA, all the Bethesda stuff, and then the entire Ubisoft catalog, because that service is currently only available on PC. So that's kind of an announcement I'm expecting, but I don't know if that. And at that point, then Ubisoft, Xbox Game Pass basically becomes the vast majority of the big AAA space. If you've got EA, Ubisoft, and then the Xbox, like, you've got a significant chunk of the AAA space on one catalog, and that. And I'm resonating with a lot with what you're saying. Like, I enjoy Game Pass. I've subscribed, and it goes back to what you're saying about, like, keeping people retained. Like, I kind of have in my head like kind of a playlist of, right, once I finish this game, I'm going to play this one. Once I finish this game, I'm going to play this one. And I'm lucky enough that, like, I've got the Xbox Series X. I also have a Switch, and I have my old PS4. And I try, don't know why, but I try to kind of balance myself to kind of experience all three. But I find myself getting to the stage of, like, right, I don't really know what I want to play next on my PlayStation, but I do have that to try on Game Pass, and that's coming, and that's coming. And, I think Phil Spencer himself said it, like, we've now got a big title coming every month from now until the end of the year. I was like, that
so the question is,
that's my playlist.
That's fine for people like you, James. And you're a better man than I, because you have more time for playing games. I just don't have much time.
Oh no, I don't have time. This is what I want to play.
But you choose to spend it. You choose to spend it playing video games.
Yeah.
Whereas I choose to spend. I can't tell you. I've got no idea where I spend my time. Go somewhere. It's obviously gone somewhere, but it hasn't gone into games as much as I would like. But yeah, that's fine. I did a lot of that in my past. I've served my time. So what happens is that the very biggest games are not going to go into Game Pass, so are they?
No.
Yeah, you won't get FIFA in Game Pass, will you?
Not the current FIFA, no.
No, of course you won't get the current one. Where's the value, James?
Yeah.
The value's in the current one. Yeah, that's the one they're selling. The old one they can sell cheap as chips. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares about the old one. The players aren't even up to date. Everyone wants the latest one. Call of Duty is not going to go into Game Pass, is it?
No.
Ratchet and Clank is not going to go into PS Plus for a good 2, 3, 4 years, right? The likes of Returnal won't go into those services. So for the really, really big hitters, where are they appearing? I would argue that the biggest of the big hitters right now are appearing on the PS5.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right. And because of that, that's enough to chip away at market share, because the people who constitute the mass market are not people like the three of us on this call. We are not the mass market. We're industry people. Some of us have got, sorry, I shouldn't say got. Some of us choose to wisely invest their time playing more games than the likes of me, who sadly has lost his way a little bit and doesn't spend as much time playing games. But most people don't have as much time, even as me. And when they do spend that time, it has to be on the stuff that everybody else is playing, right? And that's 3 or 4 big hitters a year. Now, if you can squeeze one platform specific big hitter into that attention space, you're going to choose that hardware. And that's a game I suspect PlayStation won very early. And Microsoft are now playing very, very hard catch up by spending ridiculous amounts of money, but utterly justified sums of money as well. These weren't silly decisions, because they will yield fruit in the long term. But they have to play that game to try and chip away at that tiny little advantage that creates a massive gap in the long run. But I think that's PlayStation's game. Nintendo, as we said, they play their own game, do whatever they like. You know, people are going to carry on buying their stuff anyway because it's brilliant and always will be. But the game between these two is what interests me a lot. And that PlayStation is betting that they can make first-party stuff good enough that will steal the attention of the mass market. And Microsoft is saying, well, we've just got to chuck as much value as possible at the player, so that in between the big hitters, the ones who are the trend makers, people like yourself, people like the streamers, the ones who've got all their time, so people beyond the likes of us, to play games, the ones who are shaping tastes, they're going to be talking about Microsoft games. They're not going to be talking about PlayStation games, because they're playing all this other stuff, the stuff that you've got, James, in your back catalogue or in your stuff to play next list. That's their game. It's a very interesting battle.
It's interesting. We covered the pre-brief that Xbox gave a week ago, and Chris wrote it up, and I think the headline we went with were like, Xbox is aiming to release like a big game every 3 months, or like a big game every quarter. Sony's already there. Look at last year's lineup. You had The Last of Us Part 2. You then had Ghost of Tsushima, and then we built up to the PS5 launch, which had multiple titles, including like Marvel Spider-Man and Sackboy and Lord knows what. Like Astro's Playboy. Okay, that's a smaller game, but like they had plenty. Like Sony is already doing that, and all right, the pandemic has kind of delayed that. We still, Horizon Forbidden West suspiciously still doesn't have a release date, although I think we're all hoping that comes out this year. But yeah, like you're right. Xbox is massively playing catch up.
That is sort of one issue that I do have with Game Pass, actually. It's incredible value, and it's making gaming so much more accessible for people. But I find it a little bit paralyzing, maybe as somebody with a little bit more time than you guys, because I don't have kids, etc. I will download a bunch of things on Game Pass, and I will just look at the sheer volume of things that I've accumulated without spending any money, and then go, yeah, I'll play that in a bit, because I haven't invested any money or any thought into it. I've just gone click, download all those. I'll try them at some point. But then Ratchet and Clank comes out and it's £70, but I am so invested in wanting to play it that I will go out immediately, spend £70, grumble about spending £70, and I've 100%ed Ratchet and Clank immediately because I've gone out and gone, I really want to play that. I've bought it and brought it back. But there's 5 other really great games sat on my Game Pass account that I've downloaded and gone, yeah, I'll get around to that. And then I'm not playing them. So I think that while it's accessible and it's great value, I'm not investing anything personal into it. So I'm not playing them. And I don't know if that's an issue.
I have actually...
That's the Netflix play, isn't it? That's Netflix play. You keep adding stuff to your watch later list. Why do you not watch it? I was trying to work that out for ages, and I suddenly hit upon it. The reason you don't watch the stuff in your I'll watch this later list is opportunity cost. It's because if you watch one of those things, that's one less chance to watch something that's hot right now. And what's hot right now is, especially in the video games world, is stuff like this, right? It's not the stuff I can download on Game Pass. If I'm gonna, you're using exactly the same algorithm as the rest of us, Daniel. What you're saying is, I can choose to play anything in the world right now, but I want to play the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And
yeah.
here, the interesting thing for me about the market is how many of those games can we sustain for even the hardest of hardcore players in a year? Because as you were both saying earlier, these games have a life that goes well beyond the initial release window now. How many games can the market support like that, across even the most committed players? Never mind the casual player. So the casual player who buys maybe 1 or 2 games a year is going to spend 200-300 hours. It feels like 200-300 years. 200-300 hours for each of these games a year. That's 2 games. It'll probably be FIFA and COD, right? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what about the rest? Where's that time going? So even you, who has more time to play games than other people by your own admission, you're still choosing the best because your time is valuable. It's no less valuable than anybody else's. Just because you have more time to put into games doesn't mean that that time isn't valuable and you don't care about it. Of course you care about it. Because yeah, you could play that stuff, but here's the thing that you know there'll always be more of that stuff coming to Game Pass. There's always more. In fact, Phil Spencer has promised there'll be a new release coming every so often, once every 3 months we're going to put in. And if that game happens to be the best of the time, you'll play it. But if not, you'll be getting one of these.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a weird one as well, because I have a pretty good gaming PC and I have a PS5, and that's the avenue I've taken this generation. But if I had to choose between consoles, I probably would have gotten an Xbox, but there's because of Game Pass, because of that accessibility. But then I would be missing out on all of these games on PlayStation that I'm clearly more interested in. And it's not because Xbox is offering bad things, they're just offering them at any price point at any time. I can get around to it, whereas, as you said, the hot new thing is the premium thing, the thing that's harder to get hold of.
I lost count of how many times, to kind of your point, Daniel, the amount of times I'll download something from Game Pass, think, yep, I'll try that, then delete it to make space, hard drive space for something else, then download it again, then delete it. Then this week alone, they announced a sequel to A Plague Tale. I thought, I still haven't played that first one. I'll download it again, and I haven't opened it. Lo and behold, I have not opened it. So, yeah, it's bizarre. We're getting on for time, and I'm very conscious we're depriving Shahid of time playing Ratchet and Clank. It's there on the screen, tempting him. And I'll be honest, it's mocking me at my complete lack of PS5. If I want Ratchet and Clank, I've still got the 2016 remaster I can play on my PS4, but that is it.
Oh, you don't know what you're missing, my friend.
I really don't. No, don't start it up.
No. It's so good. Shall I resume?
No, please. We'll get that. I kind of final thoughts. What we've talked primarily about E3, but obviously we are in the summer of gaming, Summer Games Fest, or whatever the hell you want to call this stretched out cavalcade of game announcements. EA Play is in July. Sony is rumored to be doing something soon, and surely they've got to be doing something soon. Kind of what. I think I get the sense of this week, came away, everyone's right, E3 was okay, but it was missing something. What is it that you would like to see announced in the next, say, 3 months, or like see happen in the next 3 months to kind of make it feel like there's kind of momentum going forward, Shahid?
Oh, I'm not waiting for anything. I just want the promises that have already been made to be delivered on. So I'm looking forward to the likes of God of War Ragnarok. I wouldn't mind some of these Nintendo games to come out soon. I'm looking forward to the stuff for 2022. I know I've got more than enough to play. My problem is not that I haven't got stuff to be playing. My problem is I don't have the time to play even the very, very best stuff. I think the industry is in a really good place. We've weathered the pandemic extraordinarily well. Nicholas Nassim Taleb uses the term anti-fragile to describe organisms that don't just withstand stress, but bounce back stronger from stress. And the video games industry has proven itself to be anti-fragile. So I'm happy with the state of affairs. I think it's remarkable we're talking about E3 at all, given that nobody attended it. It didn't actually happen for real. So that's a good sign for the industry. I'm looking forward to hardware numbers picking up post-pandemic. I'm looking forward to people actually going to retail again and hoping retail will come back from this, that there will be more of a sense of community. So optimistic, hopeful, not really worried about what will be announced, because I think there'll be lots of great stuff coming regardless. And we just won't have the time to play it all.
I know the feeling. Thank you so much for your time today. That has been superb.
Pleasure.
Thank you for joining us and watching the GI E3 Newscast. This is the last episode we've done. We've been doing semi-daily episodes throughout the week. You can find those all on our YouTube channel, or if YouTube is doing is stop playing Ratchet and Clank, you'll find it. Stop it. You can find all of those. If YouTube is doing its job right, you should be able to find some previous episodes in the recommendations on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're listening to this on the podcasting platform of your choice, you should have noticed that also on the feed, you will find all the previous newscasts on the same feed. I keep on saying feed. I need to just wrap this up. We will be back on Monday with our usual weekly podcast, where we're going to be wrapping up and talking about the biggest trends and kind of announcements from an industry perspective, as well as our picks of the games that we're most interested. That's on Monday, so watch out for that. That's going to be a bumper show. And in the meantime, you can find more news, insight, and analysis into the world behind video games at GamesIndustry.biz.